A girl named Colleen is standing on the side of the road looking for a ride. After a while, a car pulls up in front of her, with Cameron and Janice in it. They offer Colleen a ride. After a short introduction, she admits that she hitchhiked from Oregon to go to her friend's birthday party. The car continues to drive until they reach a gas station. Colleen goes to the store to get something to eat, and Cameron takes a box out of the trunk and puts it in the back seat. As they start driving again, Cameron tells Colleen that they plan to stop to visit the ice caves, but to do so, they need to get off the road. Colleen hesitantly agrees, and they head into the woods. There, Janice asks Colleen to get out and follow her to the caves. At this time, Cameron sneaks up on Colleen and holds a knife to her throat. He threatens to kill her if she resists, then blindfolds, gags, and handcuffs her. He then stuffs her head in a box in the back seat. They spend the day on the side of the road, and when it gets dark, they drive Colleen to the house. Cameron takes her into the basement and puts her head in the box again before leaving. The next day, Cameron leaves the house. That evening, he returns and goes down to the basement to feed Colleen and let her relieve herself in a chamber pot. He then beats her again with the whip, while Janice overhears from upstairs. That evening, Janice asks Cameron what they are going to do with Colleen. Cameron says he will let her go in a few days. However, Jenny is paranoid and thinks that Colleen might go to the police, so Cameron decides to keep her in the basement. The next day, he turns a wooden coffin into a prison for Colleen. Alone in the coffin, Colleen remembers the day she left home. She remembers how her father offered to pay for the bus fare, but she chose to hitchhike. Several days pass, and Colleen's family finally realizes that she is missing. They file a police report, but nothing comes of it. 6 months pass, and one day, Jenny comes to Cameron's work at the lumber mill. She tells him that she is pregnant and that they must free Colleen. Cameron does not like this idea and uses Jenny's paranoia to convince her otherwise. Looking through magazines, he finds an article about underground human trafficking and draws up a fake contract for captivity. Cameron goes to Colleen and makes up a story about working for a company involved in human trafficking. He shows her the article and makes her sign a fake bondage contract. He then tells her that she is now their prisoner, and if she tries to escape, the company will go after her family. He also claims that Janice was his prisoner and tried to escape, but the company found her and broke her leg. Cameron rescued Janice and soon married her. The next day, he puts a collar around Colleen's neck and trains her to call him Master, stating that from now on her name is Kate. He slowly turns her into a prisoner, doing their bidding. Janice gives birth to a baby girl named Amber. 2 years have passed since the kidnapping, and Colleen is coming to terms with her situation. Cameron tells her made-up stories about the fate of the captives who tried to escape, and how one of them went to the police, but the police were working for the company. As a result, the company cut off the captives' limbs. All this makes Colleen come to terms with her situation more and more. Janice, on the other hand, is jealous of Colleen and treats her badly, forcing her husband to beat her. She claims that Colleen's only purpose is to endure pain. One day, Cameron takes Colleen to collect wood. While working, he hurts himself and falls to the ground. Colleen briefly considers escaping, but fear stops her. She ends up helping Cameron and giving him stitches. When they return, Janice complains that Cameron wants Colleen more than her. Cameron offers to share Colleen's bed, and Janice agrees. However, when he tries to make love to Colleen, Janice becomes enraged and tries to escape, but Cameron stops her. Janice warns Cameron that he can never touch Colleen again. Never touch. As a result, Colleen spends most of her time in the box. She barely leaves the box, and 4 years have passed since her abduction. Colleen appears physically ill, and one day she sees Janice's daughter, Amber, and is shocked by how much the girl has grown. She has clearly lost track of time. One day, when Cameron and his family go to the lake, Colleen is left alone and begins to wonder why she puts up with all this. She begins to have visions of a priest telling her that suffering is a test from God. She even sees her sister Bonnie. Eventually, she has a dream about drowning and opens the box door. Cameron returns to find the box door open. He fears that Colleen has escaped, but finds her simply sitting in the shower. He learns that Colleen has read in a book about the bonds of a prisoner. Cameron approaches Janice and says that they should let Colleen out of the box. He also reveals that he will probably sleep with Colleen, justifying his intentions with a passage in the book that allows masters to sleep with their prisoners. From this point on, Colleen begins spending more time outside the house and befriends Amber. Janice also begins to warm up to Colleen. Almost 6 years have passed since the kidnapping, and Colleen now works as a maid for Cameron. Meanwhile, Janice becomes very close to Colleen, taking her to church and allowing her to play with Amber. Cameron becomes more violent towards Janice and wants to get closer to Colleen. He tells her that he can visit his family, claiming that he convinced the company to let her. Cameron then takes Colleen to her home. He warns her that if she says anything bad, the company will kill her family. Colleen's family is thrilled to see her again. Bonnie tries to ask where her sister has been all this time, but Colleen remains silent and reveals that the guy who dropped her off is her boyfriend, Mike. The next day, Cameron comes to pick up Colleen, and her parents ask about her life. Cameron makes up a story about how they met and claims that he intends to marry her. Eventually, they leave and return home to California. Janice becomes very religious and feels guilty for her captors. captive. One day, she overhears a conversation about Cameron intending to marry Colleen. The next day, Janice leaves home to stay with her parents, which greatly upsets Cameron. He punishes Colleen with a whip and puts her in a barn, leaving her there and driving away in his car. Meanwhile, Janice returns and frees Colleen. She advises her to return home, but Colleen does not want to betray Cameron. Janice tells her that Cameron killed a girl named Marlitz a few years ago and buried her in the woods. She also tells Colleen that there is no such thing as a company of captives and that she can go home. Colleen agrees and leaves for Oregon on a bus. She spent 2,640 days in captivity, but is finally free. Meanwhile, Cameron is caught by the police and sent to prison for 104 years. Janice becomes a witness against him and is pardoned by the authorities.